She and Hero, the SHERO.substack.com newsletter on Substack. It's free. It's something you really want to sign up for. She's also over on BlueSky at Girls Really Rule. So check that out too. Amee, welcome back to the program. Tell us, this piece you wrote a couple of days ago over on your SHERO.substack.com newsletter is extraordinary. How did Trump win? It's one of the big questions that's been asked, as opposed to how did Democrats lose, and I think that this is really the correct question. What have you learned?
Oh, Tom. Well, it's good to talk to you again. I haven't learned enough, and I think that's what's driving me to keep, looking back through all of the work I've done, because I think, like a lot of other people, we're sort of, in this whole zeitgeist of what really happened, what really was that? And like you, I have a real problem with saying that Kamala lost this. Sorry, I don't feel she did. I think she ran a perfect campaign. So we have to sort of look back into how this happened, but more than that, how we were so wrong about our perceptions of what was happening as it was happening. Mm-hmm.
So in your article, let's start with your working theory. You say, my working theory is that there's something bigger, a smarter network behind the surface of Trump's plan that's really in charge and making covert moves that will stun the world once we find out who is behind them. What do you mean?
Well, I think in any scenario, when you want to find out who's pulling the strings on something and it's not easily visible, you follow the money. I mean, that's kind of an easy basic rule. And we've been doing that a lot with the Trump administration in the past. And I think it's sort of easy to, once we realize we followed the money and the money is attached to this sort of entity or this entity, even when it's elusive, we sort of just go with that and say, okay, well, that's good enough. That gives me an idea of who's coming at us and what their agenda is. But this is different. This is bigger. And I don't know if I have a real problem saying that this Republican Party, with its level of current organization, was able to win this election in the way they did. Now, I'm not somebody who's quickly jumping to, they cheated. I mean, we don't have anything at this point that in any way, tips us off that this isn't a legitimate election. So I'm not willing to go down that road yet. Without that information, what else do we have? What else do we have to look at? Well, we know money's involved, but where is the money coming from? And what is the entity specifically? I mean, it's really easy to kind of just throw assumptions around. Okay, well, Vladimir Putin's got a lot of money. Okay, Elon Musk has been throwing a lot of money at things. Okay, a lot of these people that have common interests are throwing money at things. But this election was won in such a way. I don't know. I don't know if
Elon Musk put in $270 million. But,
exactly.
But what about the Conservative Partnership Institute? You specifically call them out in your article.
I do. Well, and I know that the Conservative Partnership Institute is this kind of summer camp thing that Republicans were working on all summer leading up to the election. And I think it was attached to Project 2025. And it was, they were funding it through the Heritage Foundation, which is how they do a lot of stuff. And they were sort of getting everybody aligned with Trump policies to get ready for a Trump administration. And I think a lot of people, especially reporters, weren't taking a solid look at it at the time because it was sort of like, okay, well, we'll look into this if it becomes a problem or if it actually is something. But to me, it's kind of an indicator that there is something already in play. I mean, Project 2025 has been around for a minute. And once the Democrats brought it out and started talking to everybody about it, people didn't seem that terribly interested. So my whole theory is, well, they're doing this all in public. Nothing's really covert anymore because Trump has pretty much proven that you can do a lot of things illegally and not get caught if you're smart about how you do it. And I don't think they're afraid of being seen anymore. I think they think it makes them look proactive or smart in some way. And I know they're not. We know they're not. We know they're not intelligent as a group. So who's really running this? I mean, Mark Meadows is heading a lot of the Project 2025 stuff and a lot of the stuff with the Heritage Foundation. He's kind of the liaison, which that's what he did in the Trump administration as chief of staff, right? And he's helping with the CPI thing. But I mean, Tom, does Mark Meadows to you seem like, the mastermind of something so big that could sweep this election? Was it just one thing? Was it all the money in the right place at the right time? Was it just this cosmic luck factor? Was it really just the voters? Was it the Koch empire? Exactly.
So,
and clearly the voters are out of touch, but how out of touch are they? That's the other concern I have. Like, we're going to have to rehabilitate our whole society and figure out how we develop going on from here so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And how are we going to do that if we can't pinpoint where exactly things went wrong and that we never really had a sense that things were going wrong?
Well, let me give you a hot take, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
We have in the United States, over the last 4 years, we have seen arguably the best economy since the 1960s in many ways. I realize there's still problems and all that kind of stuff, but the Harris polling organization did a poll a few months before the election, and they found that 55% of Americans at that time thought the economy was shrinking, even though we had seen some of the fastest economic growth in the 20th, in the last 100 years. Fully half of Americans, 49%, thought the stock market was down. At the same time, it was up 24% just this year, or just last year, and 12% this year. The same percentage, 49% of Americans, believed that unemployment was at a 50-year high when it was actually at a 50-year low. 72% of Americans, and this is just 3 months before the election, thought inflation was increasing, when in fact it had gone from a high of 9% at the end of the Bush administration, or at the end of the Trump administration and the early Biden, all the way down to less than 3%. And as a result of these false beliefs, 56% of all voters, including Democrats, although it was mostly Republicans, believed that the economy was in a recession on Election Day. Whenever you have an economy genuinely in a recession on Election Day, the incumbent party always loses. I mean, it's been that way since the 1920s. It's always the case. So somehow, half of Americans were convinced that up is down, that black is white, that round is square, whatever. And I think that you can lay an awful lot of this at the feet of a small handful of billionaires, including Rupert Murdoch and Elon Musk. What say you?
Well, I say that the evidence we have that supports your conclusion is just look at the way Twitter has been behaving, what's happened at Twitter in the last year.
That's why I said Elon Musk.
Exactly. So he's taken that over, and he did that strategically at the exact right time, a couple years before the next big election, so that he can, suss everything out and really use the platform to serve his own purpose, which a lot of people knew he was doing, but it didn't contradict what their agenda was, so it was okay. And I get all of that, but I guess maybe my problem is I have a hard time accepting that the American public in general is just so uneducated and so
in this context,
the information that's fed to them.
Yeah, in this context, let me ask a rhetorical question, If, as Donald Trump did virtually every day of his presidency the last time, if Joe Biden had walked out in front of the White House every day throughout the last 4 years, or if Kamala Harris had done it instead, because she doesn't stutter, and held a little mini press availability and said, look at what we just did on the economy. Look at how many jobs we just got. Look at this program we just passed. Instead of relying on the New York Times and CNN to report it, which they never did, don't you? And if Biden had referred to inflation as the Trump inflation, or the Trump tariff inflation, or the Trump tax cut inflation, every single time he used the word inflation, I'm of the opinion that Donald Trump would not be preparing to go to the White House right now. What do you think?
Would have been closer. I mean, we all knew this was going to be a close election regardless. We all knew it was going to be tight. And And that's because people don't truly know that the economy is working for them on paper until they see it in their pocket.
Right, but that's my point. If the Democrats had been messaging any, even 10% as well as Republicans message, I don't think it would have been close at all.
Exactly. But we were messaging really well, though, toward the end. We were
106 days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that 106 days, the things that got done and the exuberance and the excitement and the optimism and the difference in a feeling for how that happened. See, I'm of the opinion that, yes, it was the marketing and it was all of these players like Musk and everybody else, but they couldn't have achieved what they did if they didn't have a group or society that wasn't already so exhausted and beaten down and tired and simply didn't care anymore.
Well, and they had the infrastructure that Charles Koch has been funding, and before that, his brother David, for decades. I mean, there's just there's a state policy center in every single state. There's think tanks all across the country. You got the Heritage
Well, you tell me, Thom, who do you think is the real, who's pulling the puppet strings on everything? I mean, is it a group of people? It can't be too big of a group of people, because then it would get just really chaotic and strange. And they seem very focused and organized right now, which is something they have never been able to achieve.
I think it's a handful of libertarian billionaires. David Sachs and Elon Musk and Charles Koch, and these guys, they all adhere to Ayn Rand and libertarian philosophy. They're all big fans of it, as far as I can tell. And you go back and look at David Koch's platform in 1980, and that's what they're going to try and do this time.
But see, I need more than that. Yeah. I want more than that. I want to know down to the who, and maybe that's the lawyer in me, I don't know, but I want to know who did what, when, where. Well, I want to know, clearly the money came from those people.
Sure.
But I want to know where the organizational structure is, because if we're going to take it down, we have to figure out a way to fight it. Yeah. And we can't.
Well, Nancy McLean has done some just brilliant work. I don't know if you've read Democracy in Chains or not, but it's really that and Dark Money by Jane Mayer. Those two books are just really, really vital. Amee Vanderpool, the newsletter, SHERO.substack.com. You can find it. Amee, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Yep.
Bye.
SHERO.substack.com. 18 minutes past. There you go. 18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this.